Right, here we go. Green light, red light. It's 30-second interval. Welcome to Chronicles of Earth 9. I'm Agamemnon the First. This is fan fiction. We're going to be starting. It's 19 minutes. Actually 18 minutes after 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. Today is the 9th of June, 2019. We're going to be doing the Writer's Workshop all the way till 5 o'clock. We'll do the intermission from 5 to 6. And then we'll do the grind, which starts at 6 and I'll go all the way to the 10 o'clock hour tonight. Tonight we'll be playing DC Universe Online, more than likely. But today we'll be continuing the review of Book 2. We're going to have to go back and review the stuff that we did yesterday because I forgot. Some of the stuff was muted out that shouldn't have been. And so I decided to just go back and redo it. So we have to go back to 59 minutes and 26 seconds. Actually, 1 hour and 34 minutes. So let's bring up Book 2, Road to Redemption.
Told me that he kept a journal too of all his.
Okay, let me mute this out. Don't want it to echo. Make sure the TV's down. Hold on. Alright, after that interruption, we're gonna get going. People tend not to do anything till we turn the cameras on, and all of a sudden everybody has something they need to say or do once the cameras come on. It's kind of annoying. Anyway, we're gonna get started. Go ahead and redo this. Okay, so here we were. Manfred and Etta were discussing their problems, or he was going over some of the brief history, and part of what this does is, as the writer, and one of the things you have to do as a writer, I feel, is, this is my own mental thinking, is the story needs to start educating the audience to the details, intricate details that are going on that they're not actually witnessing in the story. Now, with a video book, you have two parts to that. You have the visual words that they can actually see, and you actually have the 3D, in this case, still images that help them to structuralize or take this intangible thing and make a tangible thing out of it. And so through all the characters that we're introducing, one, gives us an opportunity to introduce that character. It gives us an opportunity for the audience to learn a little bit more about that character. Now, here you have a main character, Etta, and a supporting character, Manfred, in this story. And Manfred's overall real purpose in the story is he takes care of the Waynes. It's his job. But as the series progresses, he's going to start becoming more useful to the other characters as a caretaker. And he sees his role in life as really important, because at this point he's been the one taking care of Elizabeth, who at this time really has a lot of health issues, and her health issues mainly come from stress. It's a lot of physical issues can if you have mental problems, can result in physical symptoms. Likewise, if you have physical problems, they can result in mental symptoms. So depending on the pathology of that illness, not necessarily a disease, but some type of illness, chronic or illness, in this case with Elizabeth, hers are stress related. He's been really good to her, and he kind of feels kind of a fatherly figure in the story. Elizabeth doesn't really have anybody to really bounce information off, people that she can trust, and Manfred is one of those people. And then when he meets these other people, it sort of takes the weight off of his stress. And so this gave us a nice quick opportunity to learn about Manfred through Edda. And Edda is the device that we're going to get to the character who we get to learn about the Waynes a little bit more. And this lays the foundation for what's going to occur later in the book. And through Hippolyta is really who we're going to get to learn a lot about the Waynes from. The Waynes prior to the 1920s. She's the character that spent a lot of time with the family, that knows the history of the family very intimately. But she hasn't had contact with the family in about 50 years. So the point of this book is to show what had happened in that 50 years. And then so when we do Hippolyta's short stories later on, we're actually going to get a more detailed version of the story, but from the other side of the story and in that actual time period. But this story is just giving us a little example of what had occurred at that time, so we can sit down and actually write that story out. So here we go. Let me make this bigger. Let me make sure the space bar works.
His travels and his time here at the manor, he said that journalism has become...
Turn my volume up. Yes, it is.
Become a lost art with the
There it goes. And they're talking about journalism. And this is another concept where we're comparing an old world sort of methodology versus new world methodology. In Hippolyta's stories, which are intended to be short 6-chapter stories, around 60,000 words, or no 70,000 word stories. They're sort of written like how a Western would be written. A Western, to make it to be a Western story, you typically have the hero of the story, the protagonist of the story, and they're sort of an old world character, and the world around them is changing. And so they're still in, their mindset is still stuck in this old world mentality. And the world around them is changing, but to solve whatever problem they're doing in the story, they sort of, the new world has different methodologies. And so from a story point of view, a writing point of view, what we do is we contrast that. And so the hero eventually solves this problem using old world concepts to show you just how still valid those. It's really a way to examine principles, and from a literature point of view and film point of view, you can sort of get to the meat of the story or the principles of what it's about, which are supposed to be timeless. Doesn't matter what time period you're in, certain values still have merit. And in this case, they're talking about recording history. One of the underlying things that we're trying to underscore through Chronicles of Earth 9 is lineage. We view lineage, how the history of a family, and as they go through life. is important. One of the things that the angels in the story tried to do is preserve the history of families throughout history, and that's why they tend to be family centered. In this case, our family here are the Waynes, the Canes, and the Cobblepots are the three major families, and the Falcones, for that matter. And the Pennyworth family is one of those. The chief chronicler for the Pennyworths is Manfred, and the chief chronicler for our family here is Athenata, and Ada and Steve has been helping her, and that's what we're reading. And so that's really what the Chronicles part of Earth 9 is about, is they're really just anthropologists. I'll be right back. I got to take a break. All right. Crisis averted. Yeah. Let me move this over. Anyway, everything's working right? Yes. So, what was I saying? They're talking about journalism, and prior to, really, I would say the 1960s is where you really see this change. Up until the 1950s, in at least the United States, people were still journaling for the most part. They would write book journals, basically, and you chronicle all your histories and your thoughts, and then you just have a whole series. And then when you die, you pass it on, hopefully, to your young ones, and they learn from it, give them something to read, and your personal doctrine. A lot of people did it. It's not something new that Athenata does in the story, but much of history that we know of, it was written by average, everyday people. And so one of the things that we're hoping by, maybe this will hopefully inspire people to journal. Most people think of journalism nowadays as some reporter from some news agency goes out and writes about life, which is technically journalism, but when most people talk about journalism, that's not what they mean. That's mainstream journalism, which in nowadays is not really journalism. It's just opinion pieces. What journalism actually allows you to do is to chronicle things that happen in your day and a way of exercising memory. And you just write about it, what you see, what you observe, maybe your thoughts on things, words that other people have used, and it's a cool way to record history as it's happening. And you may not think about it at the time that you're writing it, and it might only be aware of stuff later on when you go back to read it or recall it from memory. But and that's really what they're talking about. In 1950, you have the movies at that point have been around for about 50 years in the United States. It's in the culture. So you have like live theater. The entertainment industry, I would say, was around before the 1950s, but and prior to the 20th century was around, but it wasn't like in the 1950s it became a major industry, economic player in the country. And this comes about with the advent of television. And so in the 1950s, you had old technology, which was radio and telegraph and the telephone. And in the 1950s, they're competing with television, and which later starts competing with the recording industry, both records, which eventually becomes tape, and that for compact disc computer systems. And this is where it all sort of begins, and that's sort of what they're talking about here in this scene. So let's go on.
Invention of radio and movie reels. I told him that, I cannot articulate it as well as you can, but I know what you mean. He returned to his daily routine and I strolled outside of the manor where I came across Elizabeth. She was attending to a...
One of the things there too, what Etta is really sort of discussing is, it's important when you're writing, I feel, with this style of epistolary style, is each character sort of has to write within their own capabilities. So not all the passages are going to have like perfect grammar or perfect words. Their word choices isn't going to be like a scholarly person wrote this, although some of the people in are scholarly people. And this is a concept in writing. One of the things that I was taught as a writer was write the story you want to write and write it in the words that you want to write it in. And so in this style of writing, I sort of expand on that. And I say, let the character write it how they would write it. And the reader has to accept it or not. And so Etta is fairly new to this style of writing. She's only been writing for a very short time in this sort of manner, but she's getting better at it. Etta is an educated woman. She's becoming an educated woman. She's going to be a lawyer in the show, and so her ability to actually record and write things and write technical documents in her profession, which are legal documents, briefs and stuff, is going to become better as she progresses as a character in the series. Elizabeth is a very accomplished woman. She's a chemist by trade, and she is a businesswoman, but she's slowly going to learn to be a better businesswoman, and her ability to document things is going to become evident. And but you're going to see as more and more characters are chronicling in the story, they start to see it as valuable. But keep in mind that when you're writing a book in this sort of style, not all the passages have to be interconnected. Like the stuff you're seeing from the antagonist point of view don't necessarily have to be made aware to our characters, main characters, because they might not be aware of that stuff. But you can, as a device, I think, at some point connect up those dots And then at some point in the future, our hero, the main chronicler, had to become aware of it because it's in the document, right? So the way we can get around it is that Athenata knows the truth. She can get the truth at any time, and she doesn't have to really go anywhere to get the truth. She can just visualize it, and it will come to her through her vision. She just has to concentrate on it. And but she tends to live the experience because she gets more out of it, I think. It's one thing to read about something or observe it visually, but when you experience something as the person experienced it, you feel their emotions, you feel their drive. What was the thing? Did they just guess at a action? Did they yes, this is what I want to do? What did they do? Most people, how they come to a decision, they usually avoid making a decision. And what they end up doing is life is in front of them, and they just panic. A lot of people just panic and just do something, and it might result in something good. You ever watch The $6 Million Man? Steve Austin used to say a hero is someone who made a bad decision at the right moment, which is true. That's what we're discussing here is in most fictional writing, usually what happens is the hero panics and just happenstance does some action, and it resulted in something good happening. Like Lord of the Rings, he didn't throw the ring away because yes, let's get rid of this travesty of life. He was like fighting, and it accidentally fell. And it basically was destroyed by accident. Well, not very heroic at all, but he got credit for that. That's how it went down. So here we go. Now we're gonna get to see this moment. We really get to see Elizabeth through Etta in this real quiet moment. You get to hear his one-on-one discussion with him, which I think is important because you're talking about Diana in the story.
Small garden out back. What a beautiful garden, Elizabeth. Thank you, Etta. Do you garden much? I asked. I did not actually until today. After Diana fixed my arm, I came out to do something that I loved to do before. My arthritis made it difficult to do, but after Diana healed my arm, I can enjoy it again. I am glad for you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Etta. How did you and Diana meet, Etta, if you do not mind me asking? Oh no, that is okay. I do not mind at all. Let's see, I was at a local diner in Washington, D.C., and Diana had come into the diner to get lunch. She seemed alone to me, so I went up and started talking to her.
Now, people familiar with this imagery, if you've lived in Baltimore County or North Maryland, they're going to be like, where is all that water coming from? Where is that bay at? I don't know. I just had to find a garden that I would think fit what the Wayne garden would look like. It wouldn't be like this little corner spot most people's garden look like. It would be this grand thing, which they call a small garden. And that to me would be, in their world, that's what a small garden would look like. To everyone else, that's like this massive garden. But to someone of their wealth, when they talk about small things, it's like this massive. Like Bruce Wayne talks about a small collection of cars, you know, for the average everyday guy, that's like one or two cars, right? But for a wealthy dude, he has billions. A small collection of cars is like a whole car lot. Would be like if you went down to the local car dealership and they have a whole lot of cars. That would be a small collection for a billionaire. That's what they mean by small collection. So let's continue.
One thing led to another and we became friends. Did she always confide in you? I think so. She must have saw some quality in me that she trusted. When she first arrived in Washington, she didn't have a friend in the world. The only people she had known were all from work at the War Department, and many of them were men. I kind of felt that she was sad, so I would try my best to cheer her up at the end of the day. I helped her to find her apartment in D.C. It worked out great because her apartment was near Holiday College. Holiday College? She asked. Yes, that is where I go to school during the semester. Diana has been a treasure trove of information for me in college. What do you study at college, Etta? I was studying women's studies, but when I met Diana, I decided to study law. Really? Yes, when I am around Diana, she gives me confidence that I can achieve anything. It is interesting, Etta, that out of all the people you could have met that day in the diner, you met Diana or the Wonder Woman, she remarked. Yes, Diana tells me it is because I am a sun in Aries, I replied. We both had a chuckle after that. I continued to help her with the gardening when Silas came out to talk. I guess it was more from a sense of curiosity, but I had surmised that by studying his behavior that he had anxiety about talking to women, as I did not want to startle him.
Now here we get to meet Silas. He's the younger brother. We get to discuss about him more in his psychology, mental state. He's actually a really quiet guy. He's a thinker, deep thinking guy. He lives in his mind, and when he meets Etta Candy, he sees an opportunity to explore a side of himself that he has never really got to do. And I don't want to say he lives in the shadow of his older brother, but he's the younger sibling. And so most younger siblings that are reading this could relate to. If you're not a sibling, you probably wouldn't be able to relate to it. But there's always, with siblings, that was not really it's not like a competition, but there's sort of, the older son is usually the one who's going to be taking on the family mantle. And if something should happen to him, the younger son will probably have to step in there. So he sort of lives in the shadow of his brother, basically. And in this case, it's not an adversarial relation. His brother and him get along very well. And his older brother loves his brother a lot, and they have a good relationship. But this is the first time Silas is really getting to meet a woman. He's never really met a woman other than his mother. He's met girls, and at this time in the schools that they would have went to, he would have went to a private school. And up until the 1950s, when men and women went to school, they didn't go to school together. They were segregated. So he went to an all-boys school. So Patrick would have went to an all-boy. But Patrick is an older man. He's like 27 in the story now. And he's met women. He's not a virgin. But Silas still, he is a virgin. He hasn't met a woman in his life, and his mom's kind of happy for him. And then so when he meets Etta Candy, he's really at first it's a physical attraction. And he's not like oh my god, this woman is so amazingly good looking. That's not really how it's going. He's just, wow, this woman, all these women are hot. And especially his initial reaction. And which for most guys, I think that's their initial reaction. Man, they're hot. And he's got everything he could want in life. And so he's trying to take a chance here. Roll the dice. And Etta kind of knows it. And this was our chance for Etta to sort of play the role as the older person. So far in the story, Etta's been the youngest person in the scene. So she's having to really learn from Major Trevor. She's really learning from Diana. She's learned a lot from Hippolyta in a short time they've been together. So we haven't really seen Etta sort of be Etta in the story. In this case, we get to flip the roles around, and Etta can kind of be the mentor for Silas. And in culture, that's sort of how people meet people. You're either the younger person or the older person. And usually if you're the older person and you come across younger people, especially if you're adults, older people try to help younger people along. It's a thing that mammals do as a species and organisms. They sort of have this family, familiar way they relate to each other. And this is our chance to learn about Silas through Etta.
I started the conversation. Silas Wayne was a quiet man. He was tall, but not as tall as his brother, Patrick. After having studied the Wayne family portraits, I could tell that Silas inherited his mother's body frame. He was a good-looking man. I suppose having an older brother that was a giant of a man at 6 feet 4 inches in height made for some discomfort. Silas stood at a height of 6 feet even. I am not as good with physical descriptions as others, but I will try to describe Silas in my own words. He was thin in stature. He had a thin masculine complexion. He walked with a careful step, and, in my short time of observing him, I felt that he preferred to keep his thoughts to himself, the deep-thinking type, but he was kind and well-mannered. "Hello Silas." "Hello Etta. Are you helping Mother with her gardening?" "Yes, she wanted to garden after her arm was rehabilitated by Diana." "Yes, I remember that Mother liked to garden years ago, but her arthritis made it difficult," he said. "You're welcome to join us, Silas," Elizabeth offered. "Sure, what do you need me to do?" Silas asked. "Well, all that we need to do today is to check the soil while it is the dry season and the cold season to make sure the plant's root structures are properly insulated and nourished while they are dormant," Elizabeth stated. We continued on tending to the garden for most of the morning. Manfred prepared a small lunch for us with vegetable soup, assorted vegetables, and an ice cream served with a hot fudge brownie for dessert. The lunch was simple but fitting for the season. The temperature in the northwestern part of Maryland was a damp cold. It had not snowed this season, but it had rained a bit the last couple of weeks. The warm soup was a nice welcome for us after working in the garden. Patrick came down for lunch. Patrick Wayne was a tall and handsome man.
So here we get to meet Patrick. We casted Adam West. Patrick Wayne is going to be the father of Thomas Wayne, who we've gonna cast Michael Keaton, and he'll be the image. And that's the lineage that Bruce Wayne comes from. So you see that Bruce Wayne's a big guy, he's a tall guy, so his father would probably have to be that. His grandfather, definitely. And so I thought when we had anyone who was in direct line of Bruce Wayne, you'd have some of the main actors that played him would be kind of a good homage to him. And I thought that would be cool. When we get down into the Ben Affleck era, the 2016 era of Batman, he's an older 40-year-old guy at that point. And so when he passes on the mantle to his daughter, it'll, I think, mean a lot more, be better. And I always felt that, wouldn't it be cool if he became Batman because of his mother and not his father? And this, I think, it'll be a more powerful story in that sense. And so here we get to meet Patrick Wayne.
Man, as I stated before, he stood at 6 feet 4 inches. He was athletically built like Major Trevor. He was not bashful or shy, but he was not rude or selfish in his manners. He had a good-sized head that sat firmly on his neck. All of that was well packaged on top of broad shoulders. He smelled fantastic. If it was not a completely slutty move on my part, then I would do him in a heartbeat. But I am a lady and will be patient. Note to self: must make sure to call home to get my parents' permission to have sexual intercourse with Silas or Patrick should the moment arise. I saw them both checking Hippolyta and me out at breakfast, so I know they are interested. But Goddess here requires us under 25 to get consent from our parents, and having met her last Christmas season when I went...
Here's Etta talking about, it's a chance to remind our audience about the Harris law. Now, Etta doesn't have to abide by Harris law because she's Baptist in the story. And I don't want to say a good Baptist, she doesn't really go to church. But her or Steve don't really go to church. But by birth, they were baptized as Baptists because they're from Texas. But she's trying to follow Hera's law because Diana's her friend, and she's met Hera in the story, and so she feels like Etta was the kind of a person, she didn't really believe in religion, she didn't really believe in God or Jesus for that matter, and not that she with your silly beliefs, but when she actually met Hera in the story, and Athena, and Apollo for that matter, it made her think about things and like, maybe these stories are true. And so she's Hera's kind of having this religious experience over a 20-year period of time where she's kind of like, I didn't really believe in these kind of things, but she kind of feels, because of the person that she is, that because she knows the person, she should maybe kind of show her some respect, I guess would be the right word. And though she doesn't really have to, and Harris told her that she hadn't, not obligated to, but she feels it's the right thing to do. So that's sort of what they're explaining here going on.
Went home with Diana.
And the part about slutty move on my part. I thought it would be funny if the women in the story were kind of like, they don't think of themselves as slutty, but I would think it'd be funny if they were like, because they don't take themselves too serious, if they're like, you little slutty witch. They're kind of joking around about that kind of stuff. Like guys do that kind of stuff, where they're like, you bitch. Or, guys do that kind of stuff too, but I thought it would be funny to have women doing that kind of stuff in the story, but they're just joking. And remember, Hippolyta and Edda are Aries in our story, so they're like really into like sex and stuff like that. They're really into hedonism, though Edda's not a hedonist in the story, but it's kind of leaning in that direction. She's kind of in love with the idea at this point, but she's kind of a young hedonist.
I kind of feel that I am obligated to obey her. Of course, being a Baptist, I kind of have dedicated my spiritual life to Jesus. He recommends marriage before sexual intercourse, but I had already committed that sin years ago. I have not been to church since I was 10 years of age, so I am not sure about the confessional protocols. But, since I met Diana and some of the pagan gods, I am wondering if maybe I should consult a Baptist minister. It is interesting how my life has been suddenly thrust into theological practices. But, if push comes to shove, I will make sure my parents approve before Patrick or Silas push and shove themselves into me. I made myself laugh after writing these last 2 paragraphs. I think that I will dress light but conservatively around Silas and Patrick to make them use their imagination when gazing their eyes upon me. Hippolyta's Journal, Monday morning.
So you see there with both Hippolyta and Edda, they're aware that the men are observing them. And they're just playing around with the guys, and they're like, well, I need you see, she's planned out all her outfits. They're going to be a little conservative. So, and her idea is that the more conservative she dresses, when the guys are looking at her, it'll make it harder for them, which their imagination will kick in, and they'll want her more. Is kind of her thinking. Apollo was doing the same thing when she was with Alan. She was like flirting around with them, and she was like putting her breast out there, showing her body, showing herself at different angles. And a lot of women do that. Some women do it playfully, like they're not trying to have sex with the guy, but they're just playing around with the guy. And I think it's fun when people do that kind of stuff, especially people who are really confident in themselves. It's a lot of fun. And if you watch a lot of movies from the 1950s and 1940s, a lot of the people were that way. A lot of characters are that way in the stories. They're very confident. They're not, oh my God, watch out, we're grown people. We can have fun. We're adults. We don't need permission. So here we start getting to the serious stuff of the book. So with Hippolyta, we've introduced her already in more of a playful way, but now we get back to bring the story back to a more serious tone here.
December 13, 1943 or 21 degrees of Zeus. Diana asked me to write about this period of time because she thought that I would provide the most unique perspective. Because of my position as an outsider to this group or a foreigner in this land, I can provide a viewpoint that is from outside of the realm of each person, Edda, Steve, and Alan involved in this story, and because I am a telepathic person, I can give a detailed account about other people's thoughts. I will try my best to be factual in my brief. It all started.
Okay, here too, we reiterate that she's telepathic, and for the casual reader, they might not really be picking up on what does that actually mean. But we have to at all times contrast Hippolyta and Diana. And why is Diana the Wonder Woman and not Hippolyta? What makes Diana so different? And they both are telepathic, definitely. But at this point in the story, it's really unknown why Diana is stronger than Hippolyta. But she can't, like, Hippolyta innately is stronger than Diana because she's 3,500 years old and Diana's only 2,800 years old. So by age, Hippolyta has more power than her. But Diana has the ability to call upon on will more power, but it takes a lot out of her. It makes her tired. She has to spend more time recovering. But she can call upon energies when she needs it, which is why she can deal with more powerful titans titans who are millions and billions of years old. She can deal with them on her level, but she can't just go out there and just start fighting with titans. They can do a lot of harm to her. They can't kill her, but they can do a lot of harm to her, make her life miserable. But one of the things that separates Diana out from other people in the story is she has ego, but she's not an egotistical person. She kind of sees her place in the universe, and she's okay with that. She's not, I don't want to say she's not ambitious, but she's not, I got to own everything kind of person. And that's just not in her nature. And through here, we get to really learn about Diana in an indirect way by understanding more about Hippolyta, which is why I feel Hippolyta is an essential character in the play.
Started at 9 o'clock in the morning by American standards for timekeeping. Perhaps this is the best time to give an explanation of the different ways mortals and immortals record time. We Amazons use a different method of timekeeping that uses natural phenomena to record time. We use periods which are 30-degree arcs along an equatorial plane, while mortals in this time use a mechanical clock. Human clocks use a 15-degree arc along an equatorial plane which they have divided into hours. This creates the 24 hours of the standardized day. This standard system of time came about from a need to synchronize time in different cities for the purpose of shipping freight throughout the world. Our system of time came about from the need to map cycles of periods for agricultural purposes. Of course, the days of plowing the fields has long since passed in the immortal plane. We industrialized many centuries before the mortals had done, and since we traveled through space and had functioned in different time periods, the need to rely on relative ways to account for time was developed. The celestial clock the Amazons uses periods or 2 human mechanical clock hours to divide the day into 12 equal parts. Our day begins at twilight or the 6 o'clock hour in the afternoon. This is the 4th period of the day. It is easy to figure out because you just put a ruler into the ground and align it to the nadir. The length of the shadow tells you the month and the angle tells you the period. At night, you can use an hourglass to measure the time. One can use the moon to track the time, but the hourglass is easier to do. Of course, we immortals are not as concerned about the time of day as mortals are. It is interesting how mortals are very concerned with mapping out every moment of their lives. But enough about the philosophical view on time. Just know that mortals have a different standard of time than immortals. Our party, consisting of Major Trevor, Alan Scott, Diana, and myself, took Diana's car out to the first place that this creature had been sighted at. It was a short drive. We left the other car for Etta, in the event she wanted to visit Gotham City. Alan Scott drove the car with Steve in the passenger seat. Diana and I sat in the back. From the back of the car, we had a splendid view of the scenery. The last time that I had traveled in this area, we had to travel by horseback or use a horse-powered wagon. Although the technology the Amazons and the Immortals have, we have had powered vehicles for many centuries. When traveling in the mortal plane, Immortals use the technology most applicable to the period. As we traveled along the road, we could get a commanding view of eastern Maryland. Most of the area was rural country, a significant contrast from Washington, D.C. All the trees were dormant due to the colder climate for the winter season. This part of Maryland had a humid or wet climate. The winter solstice would not take place for another 10 degrees of Apollo, by our Amazon pagan standards. In the Amazon calendar it is now 21 degrees of Zeus or 21 degrees Sagittarius. Persephone will return to her husband Hades in the underworld and spend the next 90 days there. Demeter will be saddened in this time and winter will be upon us. Sunday night was the full moon, so that means Athena reigns for the next 7 nights until Hera takes over for the waning moon. I should make a note that pagans, I use the term pagan because in contemporary times, the term has evolved to signify or categorize old world religions prior to the new world religions dominating in the Western civilizations. Of course, thousands of years ago, we did not refer to ourselves as pagans, nor did we refer to ourselves as Greek. That term was a derogatory term used by the Trojans in reference to the Hellenics people. It is funny how terms evolve through the ages. Again, I am going on about time. I do not mean to weigh the narrative down with complex exposition, but it is important that the reader understand what time system we are on for reference. We arrived at the main camp in Slaughter Swamp located in the southern part of the county of Gotham. There was still some foliage on the trees, but most of it has dried out for the colder weather from the fall season. This part was mainly a rural section of the county. As we turned from the main highway, the road went from a nice paved road to a muddy dirt road. I could tell from the onboard computer that the vehicle had shifted over to a 4-wheel drive configuration. Don't worry, Alan, the car will automatically shift to 4-wheel drive mode, Diana said. Nice, Alan replied with a look of happiness on his face. The main office of the ranger camp should be up ahead, Steve, Alan said. The area that the main office was located in was an open area in a small glade. It was a small building with several windows on the front. The structure was made of lumber, which was typical in this part of the United States. It featured a small covered porch on the front. We parked the car in the front and made our way into the office. Alan led the way as he was the one who arranged the meeting here. In the office was a tall man whom I determined to be the Gotham County Sheriff. Behind the desk was another man, who I determined to be the State Park Ranger. Good morning, Sheriff. I'd like you to meet Major Steve Trevor, Petty Officer First Class Diana Prince, and Hippolyta Prince. They are here.
Yeah, I don't know who these guys are. I just had to find a picture. Instead of having an individual cut picture, I found this old picture of the sheriff and State Park Ranger of Maryland, which was Baltimore County. And from the 1940s, they're all sitting in one photo, and so this is what they look like. They're very professional guys. They're those people not familiar with state parks. I live in Florida, and I'm familiar with Maryland because I lived there for a long time. But Florida has a lot of state parks and a lot of wildlife. And the reason for them is the states are recognized in the late 19th century, early 20th century that all these areas had to be preserved in terms of you couldn't have large populations of people wandering through these areas because this is where a lot of the animals lived, and they had to control the environment in a way that people lived in a certain place, animals lived in a certain place. And so that's really what a ranger does. They're specialized people who work for the government, and they help care for these regions. And people can go camping in these areas. Each state is different in how they do that. Usually it's done through the state. Usually it's what it's funded through. And there may be a federal overlap on that, but I think it's usually done through the state in most places. And then they are a law enforcement agency. So if they have these incidents happening in these regions where these trains are being knocked around, initially the sheriff office would be called out. They in turn would work with the state ranger, the state police ranger in this case, and the county mechanisms are working together. So that's what we're trying to show here. And I found this photo of these guys. I don't know who they are. I wasn't alive at the time, but I felt it satisfied our scene here. And eventually, we'll have to make 3D models of all these guys, and we have to have someone portray them. So that's how we ended up with those guys.
Here at the request of the War Department sent to assist me with the investigation of this creature. Alan said, "Good morning Alan, Steve, Diana, and Hippolyta. I would like to welcome you all to Gotham County and thank you all for your assistance here with this matter." The Gotham Sheriff said, "With your permission, Sheriff, I would like my team to survey the first site of the incident involving the creature." Alan said, "Of course, Alan, I will take you all over to the first site. I have a jeep standing by to ferry us over to the site." The sheriff said. All of us had followed the sheriff out of the building. Outside were 2 jeeps that the sheriff had waiting for us to use. The drive out to the first area took about 20 minutes while traveling at a velocity of 15 miles an hour. It was a densely wooded area with many trees. The railway crossed through here on a north to south direction. A small service road was constructed close to the line to allow for maintenance of the track. The area had a nice scent of the native floral combined with the aroma of the water. This area was on the northern edge of the swamp. It had patches of dry land that structures could be built upon, but as one went further into the swamp it became more inundated by water flowing from...
There's an actual Jeep from the 1940s. It's when the Jeep was developed. Jeep was developed for the Army, the Willys company. It had to fit a certain weight criteria because it had to be able to be shipped by plane and by ship. And it was really the forerunner for the 4-wheel drive. And I wanted to make sure we had a 1940s Jeep in the imagery. And they're using this to go out and look at these sites where these train accidents have happened.
One of the nearby river systems. The service road stretched for miles as it wound along with the railway track. Alan gave us a brief overview of the events that lead to the damaged line. The creature came out of the south of the swamp and attacked this specific section of the railroad line. In the first attack, it only damaged the cars. Alan said. Diana walked along the line and took a survey with her empathic and telepathic powers. I could see into her thoughts as ours are linked together. Diana could see clearly in her mind what occurred here. She filtered her thoughts with her mind to discriminate for the events of that night. I must note here that Diana's ability to see the truth would see all of the truths that happened at this spot and not just the specific truths that we wanted to know. However, after years of using her power, Diana had become quite adapted at tuning into the specific truths she needed to know. Diana could clearly see that it was a man of...
It was important to point out that how Diana powers work is not like... You'll see in movies where they look at something and get like what they specifically need to know. That's not really how it works. How it works is she gets all the imagery. And then she uses her intelligence to figure out what all goes together and what is the truth here and how is it all interrelated, who are all the people. And then within that truth she has the ability to, with people and things, how did it get here, what is it about, how are these things interconnected. That's how her truth vision works. And what we did with the character is, normally in the traditional Wonder Woman story it was through the lasso that we did, but we separated that out. We gave her the ability to see the truth, and that goes back to what William Marston wanted in the character. In my notes from his researching him, he always wanted Diana to have the power to see the truth, and that way his idea was that women in studies have always been more truthful than men. Not that women aren't capable of lying, but women are more in line with truth. And wouldn't it be cool if there was a woman who lies wouldn't work on her? She was immune to lies. And that's sort of the idea with Wonder Woman. She can't be lied to, and she can't be deceived, which is why when they go to Europe, like with camouflage and stuff, it doesn't work against her. She sees the truth, sees what's really there, and not the perceived truth. There's what they call perception and reality, and a lot of times reality may not be the truth. So, and one of the things she struggles with her power is that she kind of has to hide the truth from people, because people aren't really ready to hear the truth a lot of times. And she can, just through communicating the truth to people, can make a situation worse than it is. And so one of the reasons she starts becoming more of a solitude kind of character in the lore is because with her ability to see the truth, her ability to feel people through her empathy, and her telepathy is so much stronger than Hippolyta's and other people, and her ability to heal people is growing. And part of what's happening with the character is she can't forget things, and her pain, she experiences a lot of pain and it never goes away. And this is what we're getting to see here in this power. And one of the reasons why we made the lasso an actual person is I wanted to give the lasso more depth in the story. I wanted it to be a character in the story, and how to work and how she interfaces with the other goddesses. And I wanted the Titans, the Immortals, to have more active role in the serial, and she's the mechanism by which that happens. That's why she's Seraphim. She's a archangel in the story. She's the archangel. And so she'd have to be able to communicate with all the other gods. In this point of the story, she's only really dealing with the Titans, and the Council of Elders is who she deals with. And she's essentially their investigator. She is the instrument, and when she records things, it's always to the council. They're always, when she officially documents things, the Council of Elders is aware of those things that are going on.
Monstrous proportions.
Okay.
He stood at a height of about 7 to 8 feet tall. He was part undead and part plant. He came out of the swamp and tossed the train cars around with massive strength. He was able to summon up more strength and power at will, much like Diana was able to do. I recorded Diana's thoughts on paper in the stenograph pad she had given me. After the creature threw the train cars around, he returned to the swamp and disappeared as he walked further into the water. Diana made an illustration of the creature for Alan and Steve. The sheriff relayed to us that a similar sketch had been developed by a police artist from questioning several
So here we see Diana sketches an image. This is the image she sketches. And I found this nice image of this nice panoramic of Solomon Grundy there. Huge, monstrous guy. He's 12 feet tall and massive dude. And keep in mind, Diana can actually alter her size. She can grow to gigantic size because her spiritual mass is huge. So she can alter her size. And so although when she's walking around people, she's in her normal human size. But as a Titan, when she goes to her real true Titan size, she's massive. She's like a Godzilla size, massive. And we're not going to see that part of her for some time, but when she fights Darkseid, she's this big, massive Titan. And if she loses the initial fight, it's necessary for her to lose the first fight, because that's how she eventually wins. But here we have a chance to learn about Solomon Grundy, and I thought it would be cool to put in there how he actually, how the name was derived, and the poem I put in there, and who developed the poem. James Orchid Hallowell, 1842. And it's kind of fitting because the story of the character goes back to the 1850s. Actually, he was born in 1863, so his parents, he was born during the Battle of Gettysburg, or he was a child during the battle. His father died at the Battle of Gettysburg when he was 19, and so his father never literally lived into adulthood. And his mother died at a young age of 30, I believe, and so he's kind of a lost soul in the story. And this is really what the story is about. This guy has been lost to history, and he made a lot of bad decisions, and our heroine is to find a way to save this guy, and this is where they learn about him.
Campers. They reported that a large man came out of the woods and could barely talk. He could only utter the words, "Born on Monday," to the campers. Some of the regular campers to the state park had given the person the name, Solomon Grundy, a reference to an English nursery rhyme. It was published by James Orchard Halliwell in 1842. The lyrics in the poem are, Solomon Grundy, born on a Monday, christened on a Tuesday, married on a Wednesday, took ill on Thursday, worse on Friday, died on Saturday, buried on Sunday. That was the end of Solomon Grundy. Diana's empathy detected some residual magic from the creature. I sensed that this creature Solomon Grundy had the magical scent from a powerful dark magician. Diana's deeper senses told her that this was the scent of
Now here we're introducing this concept, part of our pseudoscience and magic. The Titans, because they have heightened senses of smell, taste, touch, feel, hearing and seeing. They can sense these magical auras and scents. When people use magic, the spell gives off a scent, and it's tied to whoever cast it. And so it's very easy, using trace evidence, if you're an investigator, to figure out who originated the magic. One of the things that Titans and angels investigate are magic users in the lore. They are the keepers of magic, and one of the laws, immortal laws, natural laws, is magic can't be used for personal gain. And when you use magic for personal gain, it comes back on you threefold. That's the threefold rule of magic. And one of the laws that the angels have to enforce is that law. And if they come across this creature of magical origin, and obviously someone raised him, a necromancer raised him, and their duty is to investigate it and deal with it, and not burden the mortals. But in this case, the mortals are aware of it. So, and in our lore, we're sort of introducing the concept that people are aware of metahumans in the story, and they've been aware of metahumans for thousands of years. What has been lost in the 1940s is people don't believe in immortals. So it's very easy for the immortals to pass through society now, because metahumans, especially because of the First World War and Second World War, metahumans have become more accepted in this, or at least well known in this, by the greater population. So the immortals are finding it easier and easier to walk around now at this time period, because everyone thinks they're metahumans, and it's far easier for them to let people believe that. But in reality, people don't believe in metahumans. They don't believe that gods exist. And so it's getting easier for the angels to kind of do their job now in the story. It's easy in one way, harder in others. But let's go on.
Kirky. Although contemporary humans not trained in the classical or modern Greek tended to pronounce her name as Sir, C. Diana kept this knowledge to herself. I could see that Diana did not want to overwhelm the group with too much information. It was not that Diana did not trust Steve or Alan. Her reasoning was that she was not certain if that information was relevant to the moment. I gathered that Diana needed time to collect her thoughts. Steve asked, "If you don't mind me asking, Sheriff, who primarily uses the state park here?" "This park is used by recreational campers, local fishermen, and drifters," the sheriff said. "Drifters?" "Yes. During the economic depression in the 1930s, many people found safe haven here. Since the war, those numbers have dwindled lately, but occasionally, it is not unheard of for some people to camp out here," the sheriff said. Alan asked the park ranger, "Does the park regulate the campers that stay here?" "Yes. We require that all patrons to register at the ranger office if they plan to stay overnight in the state park. That is mainly to provide safety and justify our tax expense to the government," the ranger said. "I would like to tour the other two sites," Steve said. "Of course, I will take your group there now, the ranger said. We all returned to the jeeps and went on to tour the next 2 sites. The next 2 sites did not differ in effect from the first site. The evidence of the attack only differed in intensity. Diana surveyed the wreckage of the trains and the last site where the railway line was destroyed. It was clear in her mind and my own that this creature was the result of a powerful sorcerer. Whether the creature was autonomous or acting via the will of another entity was unclear. By the time we completed the last survey, it was close to noon. We decided to return to the manor and eat lunch and review our notes. After a short contest of a heads or tails coin toss, Steve won the honor of driving the car. Diana's...
I like that scene at the end. They're like, the 2 guys are competing. Like, who's gonna drive the car? And again, it's getting back to Alan Scott. We're trying to show him as the average everyday guy, and Steve and him are really good friends. And, trying to show that Steve... We're not trying to present Alan as a token gay guy in the story, and I think we're doing a really good job with him. I think he has shown in a more of a dignified way. Not that every guy has to be dignified, but I think early in the story it's important for us to do that. So that pretty much ends Apollo's journal, and they go back home and they take Diana's car, and so here we come up to Diana's journal.
Diana's journal, Monday afternoon, December 12, 1943. Alan, Steve, Hippolyta, and I returned to Wayne Manor just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Etta had greeted us at the door as we walked into the manor. She was in her normal happy mood. Welcome back, Diana, Etta said. Thank you, Etta, I said. Etta asked, what did you learn at Slaughter Swamp? Quite a bit of information. Let us get changed and out of these working clothes, and then we can eat a late lunch while we discuss our information, I said. Sure, Diana, she said. Steve and I returned to our room and showered and changed into some casual clothes. Mother and Alan decided to shower and change too. When we returned to the dining room, Manfred had the table set with a wonderful serving of vegetables.
Here we have the Wayne, one of their dining rooms that they're serving in. I had to find this picture. I didn't want it to be too massive, but I didn't want it to be too tiny. So I found this really cool picture of these glass cabinets. There's a big mural on the wall there. It's like columns are cut into the woodwork, and dinner tray over there. It's kind of nice. And this is like one of those small dining rooms the manor would have, I think. And they're all eating lunch together.
Soup, mixed vegetables, and a dessert of ice cream served with a warm brownie. The lunch is wonderful, Manfred, Hippolyta said. Thank you, Madam Hippolyta, Manfred said. Diana, you seemed reluctant to discuss about the dark magical energy you sensed at Slaughter Swamp, Hippolyta said. Yes, I was uncertain as to what to do. The magical scent was that of Kirky, which kind of threw me off, I said. Alan asked. Magical scent? Yes. Whenever a magician or sorcerer uses magic, their spells give off a psychic aroma unique to the caster. You can think of it as trace evidence. It is detectable for those of us who are an empathic, a telepathic, and a clairvoyant. To give you all a sense of it, I will give you a sample of this phenomena, I said. I raised my hand and in an instant, Themis, my magic lasso, came to my hand. I asked Themis to reconfigure into phase mode. Then...
So here we get to see Themis. I have Michelle Stafford in there. She's going to become more important in the story now, and the serial now. We're going to get to see more of her. And then in the next book, we get to contrast her with her twin sister, Nemesis, and why they're important to Diana. And then further on, we'll meet in book 3 and book 4, Hestia. We haven't actually met Hestia in the story, but they're really important to Diana. And then there's a 4th goddess, which is a Dike, and she's the last of the goddess of justice that works with Diana. And it's really the 4 that are spiritual guides for her. And they, as a chorus, determine what happens to people. So it's not always on Diana's shoulder And Diana really isn't the person that determines what happens to people. She's just the investigator. She finds out the truth. That's why she has a truth vision. And she figured out what's really going on. And then from that information, the goddesses make a determination, and then the council decides what to do. And how do they get involved, and what do they do? And then through them, the goddesses act out the methodology. It's how it works legally.
Then, she stretched her form to envelop the room and transform our plane to a different phase of life. Themis was able to recreate the living memory using my truth vision from Slaughter Swamp for all of us to see. Do not be alarmed, my friends. We are in a different phase of reality. Themis is going to let you see what I saw in my survey at Slaughter Swamp, I said. This is amazing, Diana. Steve said. Alan, Steve, Etta, Hippolyta, Manfred all were able to see the true account of...
So using the lasso, she extends it out, Themis does, and so they're all in this little like cocoon. The lasso's spinning around and created this environment, basically this holographic environment. And now the other characters can see the world as Diana sees it. They get to kind of experience how she sees the world, and we, the audience, get to experience that too. And so when we experience it through Diana, it's more intense. She gets everything. There's no real filter in it, and at first it's overwhelming for everybody, but then they slowly start to be able to filter things out and get to what they need to know. And but it's our chance to show you really the extent of Diana's power. And one of the things that we're doing in this lore that's different than how it's done in the traditional superhero story is that usually when they show powers, they're this grand event. It's bam, they do it. The way we're showing the powers is subtle, and they're used in practical ways that can help people, law enforcement investigations, techniques that most people would be familiar with if you're in that sort of professional environment, but they just really enhance and speed up the process, which would take months for a normal investigator to do. It just makes it a little bit easier. And at this point too, there's no real recording technology other than records and film, motion film. And so those processes take a long time to do. And so Diana having a lot of capability she has is just extraordinary for all these people to experience.
Of the incident, they could see in full detail how Solomon Grundy came out of the water and threw the train cars about. They could see, hear, smell, taste, and feel all the sensations that I could. They could see the many streams of reality my super senses could sense from the environment. At first, the sensations overwhelmed the group with the exception of Hippolyta, but as they began to understand the sensations, they were able to adapt to them. Diana, I never realized that you could sense the environment in great detail. Etta said. It is truly remarkable, Madam Diana. Manfred said. Steve asked, what is that haze or fog in the imagery, Diana? That is the magical aura given off by the spell. I replied. It has a sweet aroma. Alan said. Yes, that is Circe's scent. I replied. It does not make any sense. If Kirky is behind this, what would she be able to benefit from attacking a train? Hippolyta asked. Perhaps Kirky is not completely involved. Historically, she tends to be the puppet master. She probably laid some seeds here in Gotham County long ago that are starting to bloom. I said, if these magical currents exist, then can we use them to discover if there is an origin or confederate here in Gotham County? Alan asked. Themis, reveal to us where these currents originate from. I commanded. The imagery followed the trail of the magical aura and led to a local club in Gotham City. The Iceberg Club is...
Now here we come to very iconic Iceberg Lounge or Iceberg Club. I refer to it as the Iceberg Club because it makes more sense. But this is going to become a pivotal place. It's in Gotham County, in Gotham City. There are three ruling families historically. Are the Waynes, the Cobblepots, and the Canes. And we've met the Waynes at this point, and now we're going to get to learn about the Cobblepots and the Falcones. We really learn more about the Falcones through the Cobblepots. The Cobblepots own the Iceberg Lounge. It's like their family business, and so it's really important to them. Like Wayne Industries is important to them. And we meet Theodore Cobblepot Sr. in the story. We meet the son, Junior. We meet the son first because we're in the 1940s, but then we go back and meet the father in the 1890s. And Vincent Falcone has lived a long time because of his girlfriend or wife, Celine Kyle. Celine Kyle doesn't know it at this time, but she's destined by fate to become the Gargan Queen. In our society of Titans, there are two societies. There are the Titans, and then there are the Gargons. And the last Gargan Queen was Medusa. She's dead. She died by Perseus' hand. And Celine doesn't know that she's going to be this, and she can't become the Gargan Queen until she dies. So what ends up happening is she's been prolonging Vincent Falcone's life, and that's how he's been able to live a long time. And Celine Kyle is the daughter of Arachnia, and Arachnia in our story is the nemesis or the counterpart to Athenata in the story. And when Athenata's oldest sister, we named her Annabelle, Annabelle, went crazy and tried to take over when they decided to create Athenata, the second sister, to take over the mantle after imprisoning Annabelle. They decided that they would make two women, one to counterpose the other, and to be the Wonder Woman. There was sort of the trials of Athena, the competition they had to go through, and Athenata eventually becomes the Wonder Woman. And her origins are later revealed through 2,000 years of lore. But we find out about Athenata's true nature in the story of Diana. But we have not met Arachnia in the story yet. She's going to be in book 3. But her history is important. However, Arachnia and Diana have been friends for a long time. Arachnia lives in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and that's where she met her daughter, Celine. Celine was an orphan, and how the mother found her is there was a battle in the last days of the Civil War in Charleston. That's where the war pretty much ended. There was this battle, and a few days the Confederates were coming through, foraging the land, and that's how Arachnia met her husband, Kyle. His name Alan Kyle. Let me look at my notes. Where is it? Not getting sidetracked, but I gotta find these notes. Here we go. Backstory for Celine Kyle. Celine Kyle was born on the 2nd of February, 1869. She's a Scorpio. her mother, Arachnia, who goes by the name Angela de Bedomy, moved from France in the 15th century, 16th century. Well, anyway, when this battle's going on, she meets her husband, Martin Kyle, who's immortal. And during the battle, I wrote, Martin Kyle was a Confederate soldier that Arachnia met in Charleston, South Carolina. He is injured in the war, and he dies after the war from an infection or accident. She heals him up. She adopts the name Julia Carpenter and settles down in Charleston. She uses her wealth to buy a tobacco farm. During the war, the farm endures financial hardship. In 1867, she meets Martin Kyle. He had served in the army, and she met Martin while his squad was sent to forage for food. She aided the soldiers, and the two fell in love. For the next several years, from 1850 to 1950, she lives a quiet life. Though the 19th century, Hippolyta and Arachnia are close friends. Yeah, the mom and Arachnia are very close because they immigrated to Charleston together, and that's how they came across to the New World. Diana immigrates. She stays a French citizen, and she comes to the New World, but she didn't actually live in the New World. Her mother did, and she knows of the New World through her mother. And though she visited from time to time, she didn't really stay in the New World. But she was there during the American Revolution, and she was helping the Americans' side of the war against the British. And she was part of the French underground and American underground through Ben Franklin. And that's how she came to become a U.S. Marshal. But Arachnia is essentially her counterpart that was created by the gods in case Athenata ever flipped out and tried to take over the universe. Arachnia's sole purpose in life is to destroy Athenata, if that should occur. But since that hasn't occurred, Arachnia has no real job. But she's the safety mechanism for that. However, in this story, we get to learn about the Iceberg Club and Vincent Falcone and Arachnia at some point. And this is the story of Selina Kyle, who eventually marries Bruce Wayne. And they have a daughter. Her, Diana, and Selina Kyle end up in a polyamorous relationship later. And Bruce Wayne has two daughters. He has a daughter through Athenata, and he ends up having a daughter through Selina Kyle. And then at that time, the mother is the Garcon Queen. That's why her history was secret from Selina Kyle. But it was made secret because that's what her mother wanted. Selina Kyle didn't want her daughter following in her footsteps, and she becomes the Garcon Queen mainly by accident. What ends up happening is Carmine Falcone assassinates his father and mother to become the head of the Falcone family. And but he does not know that by doing that, he sealed the fate that Selene would become the Gargan Queen, and only bad things. And that's sort of how Trigon comes to the mortal plane. One of the reasons why Trigon is able to come to the mortal plane is because Prometheus makes a pact with Zeus with the orb of Prometheus, and this allows Trigon the ability to enter into the realm of the immortals. because when they moved the mortals into their own realm and the immortals into another realm, it opened up the mortals to all these dangers that they didn't know about. And so our immortals are having to fight this hidden war, basically.
It's owned by Vincent Falcone. Alan said, the club is washed in psychic energy.
There's Vincent
Diana,
Falcone.
mainly dark energy that protects the interior of the club from our probing eyes. Themis said, then, we must go to the club and get a detailed reconnaissance report. I said. Steve asked, is it possible for us to get into the club for dinner? Leave those arrangements to me, Steve. Alan said. After lunch, I had returned to my room to collect my thoughts about the Solomon Grundy matter. It was not unheard of that an immortal could be helping a crime lord in the mortal realm. However, I always thought of Kirky was more grandiose in her schemes. If Kirky is connected to this plot, then why would she attack a train bound for a place in Tennessee? The beast I saw in my survey, this Solomon Grundy, I sensed an undead being of immense power. Why would Kirky animate a dead man? It is important for you to maintain a clear mind, Diana. A voice.
Here's our first chance to see Athena as Corey Everson. Now we casted Corey Everson later in another book, so I put her in. Since we're doing the visual parts now, I went ahead and put her in, and there she is in her goddess, her Miss Olympia. Look, she kind of looks the part there as Athena with her hair like that. I thought it looked really cool. And here comes Athena. Every time we see Athena, she's all, it looks like she just came back from the gym. And Athenata really loves Athena. They get along very well, and Apollo and Athena get along very well, but I think that Athenata's connection to Athena is closer than Hippolyta's relation with Athena. And I think it has a lot to do with what happened to Hippolyta before she became an immortal. Hippolyta's never been at odds with Athena, but Hippolyta had a lot of hard trauma between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. And I'm not saying she never got over that, but it's very difficult. It makes for a tension between them. But Athena saves Hippolyta. She felt badly for Hippolyta, and that Hippolyta was sacrificed in the way that she was sacrificed by Hera. And so Athena made Hippolyta her champion. She became the Wonder Woman for Athena, and when Athena was putting together this corps of angels, which they now become the Amazons. In our lore, the male side of that hasn't been put together yet. And there needs to be a masculine counterpart to the feminine tree of life. But in the lore, that's going to be Superman's going to be that character. And that hasn't happened yet. But Athenata's first priority in her coming to mortal plane was the creation of the United States as a country. Country founded under the rule of law, that was a republic under the rule of law. Their first chance at that was Venice. It's still around, but it sort of fell apart. It never got as big as it could have. There were just too many people against them. And so their next chance at that was the New World in the United States. And so that's why Athenata is sort of tied to the United States in our lore. It's her responsibility to see that the nation survives as a country. And it's really Athena's sort of vision of what a republic would be, at least successfully in our time period. And so here we get to meet Athena for the first time as with Athenata.
Voice from behind me said. I turned around towards the familiar voice that had spoken to me. There standing before me in all her glory was the goddess Athena. She was dressed in her normal attire of armor. I bowed immediately in her presence. I humble myself before you, goddess Athena, I said. Athena smiled and
one of the things that we're showing, Diana always bows to people and stuff like that. And one of the things that always stays with her as a character, no matter how old she gets or how powerful she is when she meets all these elders, she's a person who believes in tradition. And so she's always like, even her enemies, she's always like respectful to them. She's bowing to them. She's giving them the honors they deserve. Even if she doesn't like the guy or woman, she always shows him respect. And even with Cersei, as much odds as they've been at, she always shows Cersei respect. And it's part of her inner quality as a Libra. She's very charming. And not that she doesn't have anger towards people or hate people. She hides that part of herself. But and a lot of her enemies like that quality in her, and when they all think she dies, it sort of brings them all together. And when they all, I don't want to say meet Donna Troy, they all know when Donna Troy takes over the Wonder Woman sort of position, when they're battling Donna Troy, they're all like, sad to hear about what happened to your sister. You know, and I think it's kind of funny in sort of a gaggy sort of way that all these demons and stuff are like, they can't kill Donna Troy, but they can certainly defeat her. They're battling and they're like, I'm sorry to hear about your sister. And she's like, thanks. She's like, thanks. But their jobs just oppose each other. And I thought it would all be kind of funny to have that in a story.
And reached her right hand out to me. She spoke with a radiant quality in her voice. The energy from her words touched my heart with a wonderful warmth of her divine magic. You have humbled yourself before me, my child, the greatest of all heroes whom I have had the honor of witnessing the many wise deeds carried out for my will. Come and sit with me now, for I have a new task for you this day. Athena said. I walked over and sat on the bed next to Athena. What is thy will, my goddess Athena? There is a matter before me that requires resolution. You are becoming aware of the matter as the fates have revealed it to us. You seek this creature you have come to know as Solomon Grundy. He was a mortal man who long ago turned towards a life of crime to seek fame and fortune. Then, he was known as Cyrus Gold. He fell in love with a woman named Saline Frances Kyle. The details of his original death are uncertain.
Here we're introducing Selene and Cyrus Gold. I'm gonna get a brief intro. She's a very important character going forward in the lore, and she's played by Madeline Smith. She was part of the old Hammer films. I first knew of her from The Vampire Lovers. It was a film adaptation of the story of Carmilla. She played the younger girl, and Ingrid Pitt played the vampire Carmilla. And I always liked her as an actress. She's always really cool. And with Selene Kyle, I kind of liked her personality. She has a real kind personality, which I think when we get into the Selena Kyle era, Selena Kyle's only connection to her mother is going to be through Athenata. And Athenata first meets Selena Kyle. She doesn't know what to think, but they're both taken prisoner by Dr. Psycho. And so Diana really gets to meet Selene Kyle as a person, and they sort of have this weird relationship together. They're not friends and they're not enemies, and on some level Athenata cares for Selene, and she feels that her origins are so tragic and her destiny is kind of tragic, but at the same time it's necessary. Because for there to be balance in the universe, there has to be a Gargon Queen. And so ultimately, Diana decides not to exercise Selene Kyle. She doesn't know that she's going to be the Gargon Queen. But she feels that her destiny is more important, and she will eventually meet her fate in time. So Diana decides not to take action against Selene Kyle. Even though she can, she doesn't. And it's through Selene Kyle that Diana starts to realize that she can resurrect people. And the only reason why Athenata hasn't been resurrecting people in the story, she doesn't know that she can. It's not like she has instruction manuals on her how to use her powers, and her powers are unique. No one else has those powers, so no one really knows, and her power is continuously growing. And how she stumbles upon her ability to resurrect people is really by accident in the story, and it takes her 40 years to realize that she can even do it. But then we get into a more complex issue, how magic works in the environment, and the philosophical, deeper consequences to those things. And we'll deal with those in another story. But the more important is we're introducing Selene here, and she becomes important in our lore.
Diana, you must investigate the matter for me. You alone will determine the fate of Cyrus and Sol.
Oh yeah, this is the point where the council officially comes to Athenata, and they tell her that, Athena tells her that she has to find out what happened to Cyrus Gold and learn of his story. She has to find out what happened to Selene Kyle, what's her story. And from that investigation, the council will determine what eventually happens to them. And this is part of the Road to Redemption. And although the title of the book is called Road to Redemption, and Cyrus at some level is restored to who he was when everything went wrong for him. It's not the end of the road for him, it's just the beginning of that story for him. And this is the flip side of our burlesque story here, where it would be traditionally the guy would be completely redeemed, and the next show he would be, hey, this great guy. He's restored in this, restored to life. That's from Tales of Two City. He's restored to life, but he has a long road ahead to him, truly recovering, and he never completely recovers. But he's on the right path. It's what happens at the end of the story. And this is the moment in time where she's officially given the responsibility here.
Selene, if there is any redemption for these two mortals, then you are charged with discovering these facts. She said, yes, my goddess. I answered, I will discover the truth. You are the only one with the power that can uncover the truth here, Diana. There are other immortals involved in this matter, Goddess Athena. Somehow, all of these plots revolve around a project the Americans are working on called the Clinton Engineering Works. I said, yes, the mortals are on the cusp to unlock the power of the atom. Right now, both sides of the conflict have employed their magicians and sages to develop these technologies.
Now here we have Athena reveals to Diana what the Clinton Engineering Works is. Here's an old photo of the place. They had a map of it, and it's a big, huge structure. That's what it looked like in 1941, 42. And they developed the whole atomic bomb program in such a short amount of time, about 2 years. And it went from just concept to reality to implementation to dropping the bombs in such a short period of time. And a massive undertaking, logistical nightmare. And this is where it becomes serious for our heroes. And this is why it becomes serious for them.
God Ares has tempted some mortal mages with this divine knowledge. Now they race to harness this power. She said, atomic power cannot lead to a good outcome with the mortals engaged in a world war. Yet, it is a routine cycle for mortals. I said, do not underestimate the power of the dark magic here, Diana. You must see to it that a balanced outcome is achieved here. Athena said, yes, my goddess. In the name of justice, I will prevail.
Now what she tells her there, do not get caught up into the endeavors that will force you to tip the scales too far to the right or too far left. Although Athena represents justice, Athena is aware that life is about balance, and Athenata's role in everything is to find balance. Her purpose isn't to eradicate evil. Her purpose isn't to champion good. Her purpose is to find balance. And even Athena is aware that if she goes too far, she can bias Athenata one way or the other. And so she's always very careful not to do that. She's just there to deliver information. If Athenata gets in trouble, she'll help her. But for the most part, she allows Athenata to function sort of independently. And it's necessary for her to do that because Athena, because what she represents, she might tip the scale too far to the right. And at some point, Athenata there is to show that there's a reason why you have a left, there's a reason why you have a right in sort of a political sort of spectrum or economic spectrum. They all have their purposes. And so her role in our story isn't to eradicate any of those things. Her role isn't to prevent humans from gaining atomic power. Her goal is to help them to learn to use atomic power in a responsible way. It may not take a day, it may take months, it may take years. In this case, it took 50 years for them to try not to blow each other up. But now that created an even bigger problem, because where you had these two powers competing, now you have all these smaller factions trying to gain that power too in the year 2000. So that cycle never ends. And so I think it was really important to have Athena tell her that in the story, that Athena is very aware of these things. And this is sort of the closeness of the two characters, is that she has a lot of faith in Athenata. And in Story of Diana, this comes to more of a head because Athena doesn't believe Athenata is dead. Athena believes that Athenata cannot die, right? Something happened to her that they don't know and they can't explain yet. And so rather than make a haste decision, Athena decides to wait. And then the other mother, Hippolyta, she wanted to wait. She needed to wait. She didn't believe that Athenata could die. And so something happened which she didn't know, but because she was the queen of Themyscira, and she had to, things going on in the mortal realm and immortal realm, she had to, as a head of state, she had to move on. It's because of her job. So to do that, she had to basically sacrifice her daughter. That's why she collapsed when she was trying to speak the word. She couldn't believe it, that she was giving up on her daughter. And we wanted to show this, how a person would do that, why they would do that. And it goes back to like in Star Trek, where we're talking about the needs of the many versus the needs of the few or the individual. And in our story, our mortals are always struggling with this. And because Athenata has two mothers in the story, we as a writer can take advantage of this. We can actually show what happens to the person affected by their decisions. What happened to the mother who made the decision to be faithful, and the other mother who wanted to be faithful but couldn't because of her mortal obligations, state obligations. She had to go on. And what happens? What do they do? How do they respond to that? And I thought it was cool with Athenata because you get to see a heroine kind of, she was hurt by it, she was taken back by it, but at the same time she understood why it occurred. She wasn't happy with it, but she was okay with it, and rather than act hastily, she decided to wait. And in some ways, Hippolyta was hurt because she lost 10 years of life without her daughter. And when Hippolyta meets her after 10 years, she slowly starts to realize that she hurt her. And I think the hurt was more subtle. It wasn't abrupt. And I think they both coming to realize this is more powerful story. I think to be more powerful, more symbolic. And I think for a lot of people in life, that's a real thing. The way people can hurt other people but not realize it through subtle things. And people pick up on that kind of thing. And I thought it was cool in this story there you could have this sort of dynamic with the two different mothers in the story. And they don't love her any less. And they care for her in different ways. And they both have a different function in the story for her. And their spiritual love is different. And so, which is okay, I think. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, and their relation is unique. So, let's go on.
I said, always remember, my champion, that our desire is not to prevent mortals from using the power of the atom. Our desire is to help them learn to use the power with compassion. Whatever side in this conflict harnesses this power will possess the power to shape the course of human nature for the next millennium. Do not get caught up into the endeavors that will force you to
Here's an important part too. What she said right there is Athena is identifying to Athenata that they're not on the side of the United States. They're not on the side of the Germans and the Soviets. They're on the side of humans. And so whatever side wins, they don't know at this point who's going to win the war. But whatever side wins and gets this technology, they're going to have to learn to use it responsibly. They're hoping that the United States wins, but it's not a guarantee at this point that that will occur in 1943 Earth here. So that's an important thing that Athena tells her here.
Tip the scales too far to the right or too far to the left. I shall meditate on your wisdom, Goddess Athena. Diana said, I have all the faith in you, Diana, my champion heroine. May the spirit be with you. Athena said. Athena stood up from the bed and raised her arms and in an instant phased out of the reality. I sat for some time thinking about the matter. I fell into a deep sleep to clear my mind. Etta Candy's journal, Monday afternoon, December 13, 1943. It was shortly after 4 o'clock in.
Now here we go. We're going to start with Etta starts this next. This is essentially the next part of the book here. There's sort of a gap between we had this huge gap of time between the big fight with Solomon Grundy and our character, so this was a good opportunity to re-explore some of these other characters. Now early on we got to see Hippolyta, Alan Scott, and then we contrasted that with Steve Trevor and Diana Prince's relation. So now we're going to get to see some of the other characters here. We're going to get to see Etta, Silas, Patrick, and Hippolyta. It's going to be our couples that we chose to pair with. We're going to, at this point, we're going to put Diana and Steve sort of supporting characters in this sort of coming up scene, but we're going to tell the story through the two women. Etta being the younger woman, we're going to show her side first. And then Paula is going to tell her side next, since she's the older woman. And we decided to have Etta the first one because she's dealing with Silas, who's a virgin, so he's going to lose his virginity in the story. And she's the older, experienced person in the story. She, the woman, is the more experienced person than the guy, so she's going to have to be the mentor in this scene. And whereas in the other story with Hippolyta, in the first scene we see Hippolyta, she was the aggressive person. But in the scene with Patrick, she decides to be the more passive person in the story. They do this skit, and it's kind of, I think it was funny, but more playful ways. So Patrick's going to be the young guy. He gets to have his, fulfill his dream here, and his fantasy. And he sort of has fun with that too, and it's a way to show our characters. But leading up to that, we're going to get to hear about Etta and Elizabeth are going to set up the scenes for us, and we get a chance to explore more of the heathen society, hedonist society, and non-hedonist society here. So let's go on. And as we get to the more sexual stuff, we'll end up having to mute that because we don't want to violate TOS policy.
In the afternoon that Diana came down to the parlor where the rest of us had congregated to play some games and listen to some music. At first, as I glanced over to see her, she seemed to have a look that was lost in thought. This was an expression that I had come to know from Diana. For the 2 years that I have known her, I have come to understand and to know when she had her mind fixated on some matter. I walked over to talk to her. "You look like someone who is lost in thought, Diana." Diana smiled and said, "Goddess Athena came to me prior to my nap. She gave me some details about our mysterious Solomon Grundy. She informed me that he was once known as Cyrus Gold many years ago. He had fallen into a life of crime. Athena has charged me with the responsibility of discovering his story. Then, I am to determine his fate. That seems like a difficult task. This Solomon Grundy does not seem to be one who is ready for a sit-down style type of a discussion," I said. The others overheard our discussion and joined in. Hippolyta said, "Goddess Athena would not have charged you with such a task if
Here's kind of a fun imagery here. We got Edda on the left, Diana on the middle, and we found this nice photo of Linda there when she's young. I guess she's in her early 20s there. Real young looking. Kind of looks like Courtney Cox in that little, or more meteor Courtney Cox, but nonetheless, it's really awesome. And I try to find an image here where they're more laid back, but in this scene coming up, they're all dressed up in dresses and stuff, and that's to show you that Diana's the one that actually makes all the dresses, and we're trying to show her skill as a dressmaker, tailor, and her ability to sew and create imagery in shoes is quite good. She's very skilled at that, and something that she likes to do is make clothes. Design clothes.
Solomon Grundy's fate was already determined. Diana further explained, "Goddess Athena informs me that the Clinton Engineering Works is where the United States government is conducting their atomic testing and development. I used my telepathy to tap into some minds while I was taking a nap. The U.S. government plans to do their heavy water and uranium testing in Tennessee." Major Trevor seemed to be concerned by this revelation. He said, "Atomic research? The War Department left out some important details in this investigation. I will have to talk with Colonel Darnell, but I don't want to do it over the phone." Diana replied, "We can fly back in the morning and talk to Colonel Darnell, and come back in the afternoon. We will still need to infiltrate the Iceberg Club." Alan said, "If you two go to Washington, D.C. in the morning, then that will give me time to arrange for a reservation at the club. No doubt that we will be under surveillance the minute we enter the club. That place is crawling with criminals. With Steve Trevor being a war hero, that may draw suspicions from the clientele there. I guess that leaves Hippolyta and I to entertain the Waynes while you three are out in the morning," I said. The brothers seemed very happy with this new development. Patrick spoke for the two. He said, "We would be honored to entertain you two beautiful ladies while everyone are out running errands tomorrow." Elizabeth, who was sitting at one of the tables playing cards with Manfred and Alan, seemed to have a wonderful moment when her son expressed his wonderful charm.
Now in this scene was the last real big scene that we could have the whole cast together. The later half of the book pretty much takes place in Diana's mind. And so when we get into that part of the story, we're only dealing with really two characters, Diana and Hippolyta. And so we wanted to really make sure prior to the climax of the story, we really got to see all the characters. And at this point of the story, we really haven't met Patrick in the story, really haven't heard too much from Elizabeth. She's been described a lot. And but we haven't really learned that much about her. And so we wanted to really, in the next day, as Diana and them are going off to get preparation done, we really needed to explore the other characters. And again, in this burlesque parody science fiction and superhero science fiction, we're putting more emphasis on the characters in the story and less emphasis on what they're doing. Although we think what they're doing is important, like the sex scenes, the violent scenes, sexual violence scenes, and talking, eating in the scenes is important. We're not trying to describe them in any real major detail. We're just, here's what's going on. But at every step of the way, we're trying to really show the characters more and get the characters interacting and learning about who people are through the characters. And that's what we're trying to do here as a burlesque parody. Again, in most superhero genres, you wouldn't really learn that much about the character itself. They would be more focused on the action and what is a result of what they do and where it leads to. But we're kind of not doing that. I mean, it's there's action, but it's not the driving force of the plot. It's just something that happens in the plot.
She seemed kind of astonished. Her statement gave me a warm feeling inside. I think Hippolyta was reading my mind because I had a swift vision of Hippolyta and I taking on these two young men. She gave me a playful, sinister look that I interpreted to mean, we would do some wickedly nasty things to these younglings. Elizabeth remarked, make sure you two stretch. Etta and Hippolyta are very athletic women, Patrick. Diana walked over to the piano in the parlor and started to play some musical standards. I joined into her musical entertainment. Hippolyta joined in with us so that we could harmonize in 3-part harmony.
Now this is showing that Diana is a very talented musician. She plays the piano, she plays the violin, she plays guitar. She can play a lot of musical instruments. And she's been playing since the invention of those instruments. But she loves music, and this is a chance to her and Hippolyta love to sing and dance all the time, and Etta likes to sing, and so here's her chance to really do it in the story. And the Waynes get sort of, this begins the healing process for the Wayne family here. These people have come into their lives and have really invigorated them with a lot of youth and a lot of happy feelings and spirit. And all the Waynes are picking up on this, and they're making them a stronger family, I think. Women in their lives, other than Elizabeth, they haven't had any women in their lives. And how we balanced out the cast was to get them all together, which I think was a lot of fun.
Spent the remainder of the afternoon doing our version of the Andrews Sisters for the group. It was amazing and fun. Manfred informed us that dinner was ready around 8 o'clock in the evening. From all the singing and dancing, I had lost track of the time. Everyone seemed amazed at how musically talented the three of us were. Diana was the only one who was not able to dance because she was the one playing the piano. Although Hippolyta was able to play the piano too, Diana was more familiar with the American standards. However, I found out later that Diana and Hippolyta could share their telepathic links and that Diana was able to teach the lyrics and musical notes to Hippolyta. Sometimes, I wished that I had powers. It would certainly make studying at college easy. Once Manfred announced dinner was ready, we all walked over to the dining room. Elizabeth Wayne's Journal, Monday evening, December 13, 1943.
So now here's the first time we get to hear from Elizabeth in the story. So she sets up the scene with Silas and Patrick, and we get to hear from the mother. And keep in mind, because it's a story written for 25-year-olds, that people, when they're talking about sex and sex relation, they're not timid about it. They're very comfortable talking about it. They're all adults. She's not overly protected in the sense that her 20-year-old son has sex with Etta Candy. She's like, oh my God, my son's having sex. She's like, okay with it. She's a 47-year-old woman. She likes sex too. She's not a nun in the story. She's happy for her son. If anything, she'd want someone like Etta. If you were kind of a mother, you wanted your son to be happy for the first time in his life, you would want someone like Etta Candy. And this begins the relationship of Etta and Elizabeth, Etta and Silas, and Hippolyta's relationship to Elizabeth grows from this scene. And this is the first chance we get to really meet Elizabeth in the story through her own words here.
3. This part of the narrative are my own private thoughts of my experiences in dealing with the matter of Solomon Grundy. While Alan Scott's group consisting of Major Trevor, Etta Candy, Diana Prince, and Hippolyta Prince was staying at the manor, I noticed that they would frequently record their activities into journals. At dinner, I had made an inquiry about the journals. Etta Candy, whom I have come to love, explained that Diana had everyone keep accurate details about their adventures because the immortals were required to keep written account of their tales. This was mandated by the god Zeus. Later on, I approached Diana about adding my written account of the adventure to the tale. She agreed that my experiences and point of view would enrich the story, so I will do my best to recall the events as I had experienced them. All of us had just sat down for dinner around 7 o'clock in the evening. Manfred had the staff prepare a simple meal of stuffed cabbage that was marinated with a red wine and tomato sauce. He had stuffed the cabbage with ground beef. The dish was accompanied with macaroni and cheese that had some broccoli mixed in with it. The meal was served with a Greek salad, and for dessert we had fresh baked key lime pie. I must admit that having the group here at the manor during the Christmas holiday season was wonderful. It had been a long time since the manor had the rich sound of laughter in it. This week has caused me to recall the wonderful times I had here at the manor before Kenneth Wayne, my husband, had died. Silas and Patrick were too young to remember the time.
Here we meet Kenneth Wayne. He was married to Elizabeth. This is her deceased husband. He died of cancer in 1920s, 1930s. He's been dead for some time. She was really in love with the guy. He's the guy that challenged her intellectually. He told her, you should go to college and be somebody. Don't just sit around and just rest on your laurels. She liked that. And at that time, a lot of women weren't encouraged to go to college. It was not really thought of. A lot of women weren't accepted into scholarly programs, the higher education. And I think to some extent that's why modern psychology is the way it is. Why there's such a rift between psychologists and psychiatrists. I think in the 1950s, most psychiatrists were men, and it only took 6 years for them to get a degree to become a medical doctor. And it was an easier path. And then for the female, who were normally at that time went into became psychologists, they had to go an 8-year and almost 12-year path to get a scholarly, a PhD in that, which takes longer to do. You would think it would be the flip of that, but it's not. And I think a lot of that was done politically, and because this rift in society and higher education, that it was a woman trying to get a doctorate degree was laughable at that time. In the 19th century, in our lore, there were only 2 women given a doctorate degree in the 19th century in the United States. I forget the name of the woman that was our historical figure. But Hippolyta was our fictional character, and she was the other one in the story. And it was through his family that Hippolyta was able to get that degree. And it turned out to be good because she was the surgeon who saved Solomon Wayne during the Civil War. He was would have been mortally wounded, but her advanced medical techniques, being an Amazon surgeon, and she used her own surgical tools to help save Solomon. Now, when Hippolyta heals people, she has to do it through medical means, through technology, through skill. When Athenata heals people, she has a healing ability, empathy she can heal people through. So she's much stronger at it. She can actually heal wounds. She can regrow bones. She can rejuvenate. She can eradicate disease. Not that when she heals a person from disease, the disease no longer exists. She can't stop disease, but she can heal people from disease. And She can heal people through cancers and stuff like that. The cancer is still inside the person, but she can heal their body to make them stronger. And and as she's slowly learning through time, if she uses enough energy, she can resurrect people, but it takes a lot of energy for her to do that. It takes a lot out of her. It won't kill her, but she suffers from it when she does that. But so I casted Val Kilmer in that role. I personally feel Val Kilmer did a really good job as Bruce Wayne in Batman. Was it Batman Forever? He was only in one movie. He had to step in there after Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton did 2 movies, and he didn't want to do a third one. And he was afraid. I don't know if it's true, but I think the popular opinion was he didn't want to get typecast into the role, which was silly, I think. So Val Kilmer came in to do the role. I think he did a really good job. And then George Clooney was the next guy who we casted as Alan Wayne, his father. And that's where he comes in.
And before that, when the manor was host to many parties, we Waynes were free spirits then. Of course, the family had built a wealthy estate from the railroad business and from a healthy law practice in Gotham County. Alan Wayne, Kenneth's father.
So here we have George Clooney. He's Alan Wayne. He's Kenneth Wayne's father. Kenneth Wayne passed away before Alan Wayne, but Alan Wayne passes away later, around the same time. And so in that time period, Elizabeth's mother dies of cancer. Both her mother and her husband die of cancer. And so and then he dies of natural causes, old age, and her father commits suicide. And so she, in the midst of all this, her whole world is just basically, it skyrockets and it gets sort of in turmoil at the same time. And so she ends up having not a lot of time to deal with the death of these 4 people. But at the same time, she has to carry on the Wayne family. She has to carry on the Soder family name. And she has these 2 companies. One's in serious financial trouble, and the other is sort of not in financial trouble, but they're sort of need to go in a different direction. They need to be reinvigorated. So she doesn't have any training for that. And so she's all of a sudden, bam, she's the guy. And Alan Wayne, I put George Clooney in there because he played a medical doctor in ER, but Alan Wayne is the guy who decides he doesn't want to be a lawyer. He wants to be a medical doctor. And his best friend is Manfred Pennyworth. They both were medical doctors in the First World War. Why he becomes a medical doctor is because he worked with Hippolyta. Hippolyta was the surgeon who restored his father back to health. He was there as a nurse, helping her, learning. At that time, he didn't know if he wanted to be a medical doctor, but when he saw what Hippolyta did to help his father, he inspires him. And through that inspiration, he decided to devote his life to medicine. That became his passion. And through that, under Alan and Solomon Wayne, Solomon Wayne was the law practice, the Wayne family law practice. He was a judge. And Alan's, what begins the whole medical history for the Waynes. And that's why the company under Elizabeth ended up getting into pharmaceuticals. And so sort of a marriage between law, chemistry, and medicine. They sort of become this big pharmaceutical company. And that's how they become that. And So here's our guy, Alan.
Decided to break from tradition and study medicine. Myself, I was the daughter from a wealthy family. I was expected to learn the proper ways to support my husband and was not encouraged to go to college. Until I had met Kenneth Wayne, he challenged me to go to college and to enrich my mind. So, I studied chemistry. The three women here this week had reminded me with a sharp contrast of how long it had been since I had thought of myself as a single woman. Do not get me wrong, I loved being a mother, and my sons have filled my days with joy and happiness for all of their lives. But, the three women had reminded me of what I had been taking for granted.
Now here, Elizabeth is reflecting on her 20s and 30s. For her 20s started out good, and then it just became a huge nightmare for her. And then she started having physical health in her 30s, started suffering because of her stress. And but she had to be strong for her children. She had to raise her children, be there for them. And what I wanted to say here was when she meets these three women, she's reminded that she's a woman, and something that she's lost sight of. Not that she's sitting around, oh, I'm not a woman anymore, or I give up. That's not the case. It's just for her, the 20 years that have gone by so fast, and she hadn't really had time to think about it. And so now with these three women here, they've sort of given her this opportunity to sort of sit back and look at things and reassess her life. And she's still a young woman. She's only 47. And she's taken a hard look at herself. And when Diana rejuvenated her arm and healed her up, she really it's a real turning point for her. Patrick is inspired by that, and he wants to help people like his father. But Patrick and Silas was too young to know his father. But in a deep way, he knew of his father, and he had conversation, but Patrick had a little bit closer to his father. He was 7 or 8 when his father died. So, but his connection, the passion for medicine wasn't really his passion. And at this point in his life, Patrick doesn't really know what his passion is. Silas too, he doesn't know what his passion is. And it's through when they meet Batwoman, Catherine Kane, and Athenata helps her, builds her up, basically. Kenneth decides to study medicine. Not Kenneth, but Patrick decides to study medicine at that point because he feels he can help people. And that's why he does it. And eventually his son becomes a doctor. And Bruce Wayne doesn't become a doctor. He becomes Batman. But, which that could change. I'm thinking of giving Bruce a career, but he seems to be more focused in law. I would think he's carrying on the Wayne family tradition of law. And so here we go.
For many years, being a woman, Diana, Etta, and Hippolyta had sung a wonderful set of songs before dinner. All of us were dancing and singing like we used to do at the manor. I felt a genuine warmth in my heart as Silas and Patrick had flirted around with the women. Ever since my arthritis condition slowed me down, I had not been able to enjoy many simple pleasurable behaviors, dancing, and sexual intercourse. I write those two behaviors mainly to give the reader the context and the scope of my disability. To have certain behaviors taken from you and then suddenly to be able to enjoy those pleasures again was giving me the feeling of exuberance. Although I am not telepathic, I could sense the sexual stimulation in the air as we all had danced together. Later, I had been able to learn that Diana and Hippolyta had given off strong pheromones that brought out people's natural desires. Etta had explained to me while we had gardened earlier today that she had not...
Here we are, we're reconnecting with the pheromones. Remember, our angels in the story, they give off these natural pheromones, and it affects everybody, the women and men. And for the women, it to say it helps give them confidence, but it sort of takes away their dark energy. It makes them sort of happier and joyful. And then when they're away from it, all that darkness comes back. But for Elizabeth, it gives her hope and strength, and just what she's sort of picking up on her. But this is when her relation with Etta starts to really grow, and I think it's fun to have an older woman sort of finds inspiration from this younger woman who's 23, and she sort of misses that quality. Elizabeth sort of was like Etta Candy at that age. She was I guess lost. I guess you would think of it as sort of that's who she kind of was at that age. She was just full of life person, and she's trying to figure out how she got to where she was, and through Etta she's kind of connecting with that. And it's really through Catherine Kane that Elizabeth finds joy. And so when she's around Catherine, she starts to think of Catherine more of a daughter and less of a lover, and that creates problems with them because Catherine sort of falls in love with Elizabeth, although she's an older woman. But Elizabeth doesn't love Catherine in the same way, and it doesn't create a rift for them, or I hate you, you hate me type thing. It's she doesn't know how to deal with that. Or should she deal with that? So it's be something that we explore with the characters. But Etta is really the character that helps Elizabeth find her way back. I guess her redemption, her road to redemption, is her road back to light is through Etta Candy.
Not understood the phenomenon either until Diana had explained it to her. However, once I had become cognizant of the phenomenon, I have been able to control my feelings. Diana had let me see some of the journal entries that had been written thus far. At first, I felt uncomfortable about reading some of the sexual encounters that had been written by the others, but as I had thought about it more, I seemed more interested to read about the others' unfiltered stories. Myself, the journals I kept were more of the simple here is what happened on Tuesday style of writing, but these journals had captured the inner thoughts and feelings of each of the writers. I had enjoyed learning about the mental processes of the immortals that were in contrast with the mortals in the story. It is interesting how after living for thousands of years, that Diana and Hippolyta could remain so exuberant about life. But enough about my curiosities. Let me continue on about dinner. We had all sat down at dinner. We were all happy in spirit from the wonderful songs Diana had played on the piano. The meal was delicious. The boys seemed most interested in talking to Hippolyta and Etta about their backgrounds. Patrick asked, if you do not mind me asking, how did Etta and Hippolyta meet? I gathered from the tone in his voice that he was not aware that Hippolyta was thousands of years old. I too must admit, I felt uncomfortable about Patrick and Silas dating Hippolyta. This was not because I distrusted her.
Now here we have to deal with Elizabeth as the mother of Silas and Patrick having to deal with Hippolyta. This is where we deal with the mother aspect of the character. Would she be apprehensive about this woman? Because Hippolyta is she's, I don't want to say cougar, she's a lion in a relationship. She's a woman who's very confident in her abilities. She loves being a woman. She has no quarrels about being a woman. She has no, if they're old enough, she doesn't care. She'll sleep with anybody. And she's not a cheap woman, but she's lived long enough that she doesn't see sex as like this rite of passage, or she doesn't see it as the most important thing in the world. For her, it's just like going out and jogging, and something that she does to have fun, pass the time. What better way to pass the time than to have fun with people? And they're happy, you're happy, and that's kind of how Hippolyta is. But here we get Elizabeth, the mother quality kicks in, her maternal instincts, and and Hippolyta is aware of it, and I think it's very honest that Elizabeth comes out and just says she's in her thoughts. She kind of is apprehensive about it, but at the same time, she can't baby her son. Her son's a man. He's not a little kid anymore. And like with Etta Candy, if your son's going to have a relation with anybody, wouldn't you want it to be with someone who, one, knows what they're doing and is not going to just, like, if Hippolyta has sex with Silas or Patrick, she's not going to, oh my God, I'm massively in love with this guy. But she's concerned that Silas is still a virgin. He's still at that stage of his life where the first woman he has sex with is going to affect him for the rest of his life, either positive or negatively. So she's concerned that if Hippolyta meets Silas for the first time, Silas might take it too far. He might go too deep for her and get confused, and this might hurt him. And he might be hurt in a way that he's never going to get over it, and she doesn't want that. But at the same time, too, she can't baby him. She can't. These guys could go join the army and go fight in the war at any time. So, this is her thoughts on the issue, and I thought it was important to have it in the story.
It seemed more like a maternal instinct. Perhaps it was just fear creeping into my anxieties. I felt that perhaps Silas was not ready for someone as mature in her sexuality as Hippolyta was. He might fall too deep for her. Etta answered the question. I had met Hippolyta a year ago when Diana took me home with her on winter vacation. Hippolyta said, I had known about Etta for a while because Diana had sent me detailed stories about her for many months before meeting her in person. Also, I am a telepath like Diana and we can read people's thoughts. Silas said, Really? I have never met a telepath before. How does it work? Hippolyta said, I can read everyone's thoughts instantaneously. The more that I focus, the narrower the gambit I can read. Silas said, So, the scope is wide but can be narrowed by concentration. Exactly, young Silas, Hippolyta said. Silas asked.
Now here we're also getting to see Silas a little more. He's an intelligent guy. He's inquisitive. He thinks in a scientific way, though he's technically not a scientist or a hobbyist scientist. Get to see that he's an intelligent guy. He's picking up on what she's saying. He's not lost in the conversation. He's really curious about this, and he's fascinated by meeting Angelico people for the first time. It's just fascinating for him.
Amazing. What am I thinking about now? Hippolyta laughed and smiled as she asked, Do you really want me to answer that question, young Silas? It could be embarrassing for you. Hippolyta looked towards me with a look I interpreted as this was going to be awkward. Silas replied, I will probably live to regret this, but my curiosity has the better of me. Hippolyta said, You are hoping that with charm that you can invite Etta and myself to your playroom. Silas laughed and said, Remarkable, Hippolyta, that is exactly what I had thought about. Hippolyta said, I could take you up on that request, but since you are under 25 years of age, your mother would have to consent to such a union. Etta said, in the immortal plain silence.
Now here, Hippolyta knows what Elizabeth is thinking and why, and it shows the compassionate side of Hippolyta, and that she agrees with Elizabeth. She understands what Elizabeth is saying because she's a mother too. And one of the aspects that we're trying to portray with our female characters at all times is we wanted to show the characters who were mothers in the stories and the different stages, I guess, stages of being a woman. Just different stages of being a man. You have the young sort of man, sort of virgin man. Then you have the sort of dating man. He's not a virgin, bachelor man. Then you have the man who's in a relationship either through marriage or non-marriage. And then you have the father. And then you have the father-son dynamic. And then so with the female characters, we wanted to show not only the single woman, the young single woman, older single woman, the married woman, the married woman who's a mother aspect, and how they relate to each other, and young mother versus older mother, more experienced mother versus inexperienced mother. And so and in this situation, it's very unique because the two oldest people in the room are the youngest looking people. So on a physical level, the two oldest people look like they're 25. And so they look like Etta's age. And so this is very unique. And Elizabeth and Manfred are physically looking, they're old, they look older than they could be Diana and Hippolyta's mother, if you weren't really thinking about it, and Manfred too. And so I thought it would be always unique with these characters that you could do that with. It's probably a unique scene. You couldn't really see that in any other movie or any other way where you would have this unique dynamic. And it's from a psychology point of view, I feel it's a fascinating conversation here going on, because just the dynamics on a physical level, a spiritual level, a mental level, and emotional level is pretty awesome. And but the people who are sort of very compassionate in this scene are the elder people, the wiser people, and they're sort of okay with all these younger people having sort of their apprehension and second thoughts. And this is what Hippolyta sort of tells or iterates to Elizabeth here. She relates, she understands what's going through her head.
They considered sexual intercourse the actual marriage. Through intercourse both people involved are spiritually joined. Patrick said, "That is fascinating. So, you are saying that Silas would be married to you if you two had sexual intercourse? What happens in a divorce?" Diana answered, "In the immortal plane and in the ancient world going back several thousand years, people did not have ceremonies granted by the state to get married or get divorced. Men or women just stopped having sexual intercourse." I asked, "What happened with the children?" Diana replied, "If the man left the woman after he fathered the children, then he would leave them the house and means to care for the children. However, in practice, if they were not affluent with wealth, then they would share the same house. It was not uncommon for several families to occupy one household. The sexual intercourse, which was called marriage or sometimes expressed as come to know of in literature, did not obligate you to just one partner." Hippolyta said. Etta asked, "How does Hera's law fit into this?" Hippolyta replied, "Hera governs over all unions or partnerships. Hera requires that all parties involved give consent." I asked, "So, if the husband wanted to date another woman or the wife date another man, they just had to ask the other for consent?" Diana replied, "Yes. For the most part it worked out well, but occasionally, you had one party member who did not consent and the other partner just disobeyed the law." I asked, "What happens if they disobey the law?" Etta replied, "Then goddess Hera would curse you." Hippolyta said, "One could not enter the Elysium fields if the goddess Hera cursed them." Patrick asked, "How would one get a cursed removed?" Diana answered, "Goddess Athena would send one of her champions to redeem the person." Alan asked, "Champions?" Hippolyta answered, "Yes, think of them as angels." Like Diana, she is sent to redeem mortals or immortals who have lost their way. In the pagan culture, people strived to be heroes. Only heroes could enter the Elysium fields. Silas asked, "Wait, you and Diana are immortals?" Hippolyta replied, "Yes, we are immortals." Etta said, "Yes."
So here is the formal part of the story where the Waynes really find out about the immortals. This is where it's expressly said. We're not talking to the audience, we're talking to the characters. The characters really understand. Now again, this goes back to the mortals in this time period. They know about metahumans and they know about mortals, and there's this dichotomy going on. But they don't really know about immortals. They don't believe they exist. So this is the first chance the Waynes, one of the most powerful families in the United States and the world, they're meeting immortals for the first time.
They are both several thousands of years old, Silas. Hippolyta said, that is why your mother is uncomfortable about you having a sexual relationship with me, Silas. She fears that you are not mentally prepared for a woman as mature as myself. It is a mother thing, Silas said. I can understand that, Ms. Hippolyta. I have not had any sexual experiences with women, but, as a man, I wouldn't mind my first time being with any of you ladies. You three are the most beautiful women I have ever met. We all laughed after his honest candor.
Now, right there, that's Silas showing his youth. Though he's a smart guy, he's an intelligent guy, he's a thinker. When it comes to being around women, he's kind of a fool, a buffoon. And we're not trying to embarrass him here. He's really being very honest. He's not filtering his speech, and he's kind of feeling with the three ladies, since they can read minds anyway, there's no point in hiding it. And so he's just saying what's on his mind. And if, I'm going to use the term, plays his cards right, he might lose his virginity here. And that's really what he wants to do. Every young man wants to lose their virginity. And he's got these three beautiful women here. He feels like he's got a good shot at it. And, what guy wouldn't? And so, here begins his joy.
I felt deeply for Silas and his honesty. I said, well, in that case, I give my consent if you promise me not to fall too deep, my son. If you fall too deep for Hippolyta or Etta, the lost may crush your young spirit for a long time, and you will never get over that kind of...
What Elizabeth is telling him, there's two parts to it here, I think, for her. She happy for her son. She doesn't want to hold him back, but at the same time herself, she's going through this same sort of experience that her son is going through. He's trying to express himself in a way that is uncomfortable for him, and she's sort of at that same state in a weird way. Though she's not a virgin, she's had children. She hasn't been with anybody in a long time, 20 years. And so she's kind of why don't I apply these same things to myself sort of state. And this occurs the next day when she's with the women and they're running. But we're sort of setting that up now because she's going to kind of go away from the story, and then we bring her back, and then we get to see more of her. But as writers, we're revealing a little bit of each character as we go, which I think is fun as a writer.
Pain for all of your life. We all carried on with dinner and then made our way back to the parlor for after-dinner liquors. Myself, I warmed up to a nice brandy. Diana and Steve retired early to their room as they both had to wake early to return to Washington, D.C. for their meeting at the War Department. Patrick and Silas spent their time trying to woo the ladies. I had Manfred turn on a nice record. As it might be awkward for my sons to have their mother looking over their shoulders, I quietly departed the room and returned to my room. Alan Scott had decided to return to his home for the night to take care of some arrangements for tomorrow. Etta Candy's Journal Monday.
Okay, so there we end Elizabeth. Elizabeth, as from a writer point of view here, we used her as the device as our pointer scene. She set up the scene. She transitioned from one story, part of a story, to another. And so this is when we went, after beginning with Hippolyta, we went to a more serious part of the plot, the Solomon Grundy stuff. And then we arced that way. And then we seesawed back to Etta, sort of swing it back the other way. And then Elizabeth was the character that we swung it back, the story back the other way. And this is the secondary plot of the story, character development. So we go away from the Solomon Grundy story, the main plot, and we use this time to explore Patrick and Silas, and through them we're going to explore them through both Etta and Hippolyta, which we're going to pick up tomorrow. So this is where we're going to end it for today. I got to write the time. It's 2 hours and 11 minutes 32 seconds. So I gotta run to the store to buy some soda because we're out of it because there's nothing to drink. But we're gonna make this smaller. There we go. Everything's right in the universe. Let's bring this over here. Smaller. Spare. And switch this over to Nightbot. There we go. Close this. So let's go ahead and we're going to switch out our feed. There'll be a 30-second delay, then it'll switch back on and we'll be in our intermission. And then we'll be back at 6 for the grind. So here we go. There'll be a 30-second delay and the intermission will start.